Welcome into One-on-One. I'm Reed Spencer, joined by my co-host Logan Mosier, as always, and special guest Beth Mowins from ESPN. How are you?
I am fabulous. Very good to be here, although it seems like it's 2-on-1 today instead of 1-on-1 on the show. But I'm ready.
It is. So you got in, you're big in play-by-play. How did you get into that? Did it start when you were really young, or when did that start?
I grew up in Syracuse, New York, so Syracuse University, college town, all kinds of sports going on all the time. My dad was a high school coach, and I had 3 brothers, and all the little kids in the neighborhood, we all played sports, from wiffle ball to kickball to ghost in the graveyard. Technically, I don't know if that's a sport, but everything was competitive, and all the while, I would just be spitting out play-by-play as I was running around the bases or, running around playing kickball, doing whatever. So I kind of knew at an early age that that might be something that I would be interested in. And then as I got a little older, and it started in high school, I kind of realized there aren't many other women doing this, and so maybe I could carve out a nice little niche for myself if I can get really good at it.
So I was reading a previous interview, and they said you had a Mr. Microphone.
Ooh.
What is a Mr. Microphone, if you could explain
so
that?
So a Mr. Microphone, I think you can still Google it if you want. There used to be a commercial of this little kid rolling around on a big wheel, which actually, do you guys even know what big wheels are? Yeah, okay, so big wheel was basically a three-wheeler, for little kids. And so the Mr. Microphone it was basically the first wireless microphone, and you could pick up the volume on here's another thing that's outdated, your transistor radio. So you could use your radio basically as an amplifier. And this little kid on his big wheel was riding all over town on his Mr. Microphone, and the classic line was, "Hey, good looking," and when he saw a little girl, "I'll be back to pick you up later." And so, yes, I had a Mr. Microphone, and I would use that all the time calling games with all the other kids in the neighborhood.
Nice. Can you kind of explain what it's like when you prep for a softball game or a football game? Like, when do you start? What information do they give you about the teams? What do you have to go get yourself? Can you just kind of talk about your process?
Yeah, it's all a little different. Football, quite often, is we don't know who the game is until the week before. Basketball, softball, we usually have a little heads up, so you can actually start prepping for basketball as the season is beginning and just kind of keep an eye on things. And then usually for those sports, and then for football, you get your game board going. Basically on Sunday, we'll find out where our game is the next Saturday. And for football, it's a real time-consuming affair. So it usually starts out with, say, we've got Oklahoma State and K-State. So I would try and go back and watch last weekend's Oklahoma State game and K-State game. May get some video from my analyst who's also watching tape. He might send us clips, say, here are things to look for. And nowadays you can find everything. Game notes, coach interviews, player interviews. You can listen on the internet to whatever the talk radio is going on here in Stillwater and up at K-State. And so it's a matter of sort of what I call foraging. And you gather and collect all your information. And then as the week goes on and you have conference calls with both coaches and coordinators, you kind of sift through, okay, here's what they think is important, here's what the analyst thinks is important, and then we usually will roll into town 2 days ahead of time and meet with the home team coaches, maybe some players, and then Saturday you're off and running. If it's a noon kick, we love those. You wake up at 6 a.m., you're at the stadium 3 hours ahead of time, and you're just kind of soaking in the atmosphere and you're going.
Nice. Do you have any catchphrases you have, like, that you use personally, or some others that you hear other people use? What are your favorites?
I keep hearing from people that I need a catchphrase, and it's probably high time that I got one. I don't really have one that sort of has stuck with me over the years. Certainly Dick Enberg's "Oh My" is one of those. Marv Albert, yes, and it counts. Those are probably a couple that stand out, but I've never really gotten around to getting a catchphrase. So if you guys have any ideas, I'm all ears.
All right.
What did it mean to you to be the first woman to call that nationally televised NFL game?
Honestly, it really had nothing to do with being the first woman. It had everything to do with being the first me as a little kid, and sort of embracing every little boy or girl out there that had a dream. That's what I wanted to do from a very early age. And so it was just sort of that feeling of being able to chase something, running into obstacles and figuring out ways to overcome them, and putting yourself in a position to be considered for that job and then ultimately getting that job. And then what happened when I did get it was I did start hearing from a lot of other women about how special it was and how cool it was to see me and hear me calling the game. So it has taken on a lot more meaning in terms of being the first woman to call Monday Night Football and to call a nationally televised game on CBS, just because the research does show that it really does matter if it's somebody that looks like you and sounds like you that has the opportunity to do those kinds of things.
Well, Monday Night Football and nationally televised NFL games have a different feel to them. I mean, softball's exciting, college football's exciting, but that's the one thing that everyone looks forward to in a week, at least for me. Did you have goosebumps going into that booth that day because it was in a different stratosphere almost with Monday Night Football?
Oh, absolutely. Goosebumps in a good way. I like to think if your stomach's not churning a little bit, it must not matter to you. So I still to this day, in most cases, do get a little bit nervous before an event, and that's a great way to just kind of signal, all right, I'm ready. But honestly, for Monday Night Football, it was really a 6-month preparation, and working with Rex, Ryan, and our crew that started out actually at a Florida State spring football game. That's how far back we went. We did some preseason games, and so ultimately, when I got up there in the booth, I felt like I always do. If I'm prepared for anything and I can talk about everything, then hopefully it's a great game and I don't have to worry about any of that outside stuff and just do what I've been trained to do, and sort of repetition takes over. And there probably was a giddy moment early on that really kind of signaled, okay, there's a lot of people watching this, and you probably when you hear the Monday Night Football music, dun 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 dun, and you look over and there's Rex Ryan, and he's like a schoolboy. He was so excited to be there too. He'd never done anything like that, so it was a pretty remarkable night.
Yeah, you were more experienced than Rex Ryan going into that, but can you kind of take us behind the curtain a little bit and give us some of the tips that you gave him?
We knew going into it that Rex obviously had great stories to tell, and his football acumen is second to none, and he would have all the X's and O's covered. And much to Rex's credit, I love him forever, because he basically walked in and said, you guys are all the experts, teach me. I want to learn. I understand for all of you guys that are on this show, this is a big deal, and I want to hold up my end. So I think a lot of the things that we worked on with Rex and we did, I think it was in all told 5 or 6 practice games or rehearsal games. Basically just feel comfortable with being in the booth, feel comfortable with the language, a VO, a SOT, a lot of things that are foreign to people that aren't in television like we are, and just let the football take over. And he was so eager to learn all of the ins and outs of the mechanics of it, and then he was great in giving us all the X's and O's and strategy and things that we could kind of latch on. And it was a real great give and take kind of relationship that ended up being beneficial for everybody.
That was such a great experience for you and obviously for Rex Ryan. And you talked about the positivity that you heard from different women about coming to you and what it meant to them. But the social media aspect of it, some people can kind of be the negative side of those things. Yeah. How did you handle that negativity on social media?
You kind of know what's out there, and quite honestly, for my generation, it's, I think, a lot easier than yours to simply put the phone down.
Yeah.
And not go looking for negative, not worry about what other people are saying. I got some great advice from some friends that had been in the NFL a while, and it's the phrase, and if you picture in your mind who's in your huddle. And so our crew and Rex, that was our huddle. All my family and friends and mentors that I had growing up, and other coworkers, and you listen to the positive voices. And that crowd, some of the crowd is fabulous, they're great. some of that crowd is yelling and heckling, and you just really, you have to develop a thick skin, I think, early in this business, and so having a lot of experience definitely helped in being able to shut out all the negative noise. And I grew up playing sports. I've always been a competitive person, so if that gives you a little more juice, hey, so be it. I'll take it.
Team captain at Lehigh, right?
Lafayette now.
Lafayette.
Oh boy,
Sorry.
That would be saying I was a team captain at Oklahoma, but I'll give you a pass on that one. But yeah, Lafayette.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to women that want to follow in your footsteps and get in that booth?
I would say first and foremost, it has to be your dream. Really, for any woman or a guy that wants to do it, it's a passionate calling, and that's what I call it, because you're working nights, you're working weekends, you're working when everybody else is playing, and there's nothing quite like the repetition and putting in the hard work and the homework to prepare yourself. You got to love it, and if you have that base and that foundation, you can overcome a lot of different things that may pop up in your way. And one of the things that I always say is never say no for no particular reason. No job is beneath you. No offer to come be a runner or pull cables, or when ESPN comes to town to go work as a runner on that show, because it's a people industry still at its essence, and it's who you know and how well you can network with people that really kind of gets you through the maze of all the things that come at you.
You've accomplished amazing things in this business, and for some people you are the mentor, but you mentioned earlier in that huddle, when you're trying to avoid that negativity, but who was your mentor growing up or anything like that?
I was really lucky from a very early age, certainly my family, and all my teachers, even in high school, when I said I want to be a play-by-play announcer and I want to call all the big games and work at all the big networks. A lot of people along the way probably could have snickered and said, oh, you'll never do that. I was very fortunate. I had never had any of that kind of stuff to my face. I had wonderful encouragement. And then growing up in Syracuse and then going back to Syracuse for my master's, that plugs you into everybody, from Marv Albert and Bob Costas to Mike Tirico and Sean McDonough and some of my contemporaries like Dave Pash. You have the opportunity to sort of lean on a lot of those different guys along the way. And then as more and more women started to show up, I worked, in my early days with, Doris Burke and Holly Rowe and Heather Cox and a lot of people like that are now, that we've all kind of come up together and been there to support one another. That's been a huge help.
So we're going to do some rapid fire questions for you.
I'm ready.
Interesting ones.
I will try rapid fire answers too.
All right. Best game you've ever called?
Best game I've ever called. Whew. Oh boy, you guys aren't going to like this one. Oklahoma over Florida, 17 innings in the Champ Series, Game 1 a couple years ago. That's probably the best game.
Jumping off the rapid fire question, because you mentioned that, I was at home on my couch and is like, how do I get through this?
Yeah.
You're in the booth. How do you get through that marathon?
Funny story. So I am a coffee drinker, and we usually have some, just some candy or something in the booth, little sugar. So somebody asked me that question after the game, and I said, well, I love Skittles. We always have Skittles up there. So about a month later, and I tweeted it. Here's the power of social media. About a month later, I got a massive box of Skittles that I still haven't gotten through. That they sent to me after that and had seen it on Twitter. So it was a lot of sort of, you can't sit down. You got to stand up. You got to move around between innings. You got to, do the whole slap in the face, spritz yourself with a little water, whatever it takes. And fortunately, let's see, 17 innings, I would say maybe 5 or 6 of those extra innings, we either had a threat or we had runs scored. So the action really kind of helped us through as well.
Yeah. How do you gauge the action, something like that? How do you match the tone of a game?
I think with experience, as you go along, it's something that we call contour and context, and you really kind of see a game in waves and hear your voice in waves, and you really should sound different calling a play in the first quarter than you would at the end of the game. So the big thing as you get deeper and deeper is you've got to try and keep your energy up, and basically you have the understanding. Another thing we talk about a lot is situation. So as soon as there's a base runner, things are amped up because now that's either the go-ahead run or the potential game-winning run, and you have to bring yourself up to match it without screaming into the microphone.
So you've been there for some amazing moments in the Women's College World Series, but what else is out there? What game do you want to call the most?
Oh, gosh. Well, I always dream big. If your dreams don't scare you a little bit, then they're not big enough. I don't know if you guys have seen that sign before. So I grew up a Yankee fan. I would love to call a Yankees game at Yankee Stadium. I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family, so a Notre Dame football game would be pretty special to be able to call that. And then the Olympics probably would be something that is out there that would be, I think, really fun to be a part of, especially in Paris or Los Angeles, which are coming up in the not too distant future.
Dropping a little hint.
If I, as long as what is it? As long as the creek don't rise, we'll probably be there.
So let's say you get the Olympics or a Notre Dame football game. Who you can pick anyone.
Oh.
Who are you calling the game with?
Wow. I've really enjoyed Tony Romo's work of late. Notre Dame football, the guy I work with right now is Rocky Boyman, who is a Notre Dame grad, so that would probably be pretty good. Mendoza, I think, would be a lot of fun to call a Yankee game with. And the Olympics, oh boy, that maybe call either softball with our crew that we have now, or if I had a chance maybe to call women's basketball with one of the legends of the game, maybe a Sue Bird, who's always been one of my favorites to watch.
So you don't get much time before you get into town. You have to do all this work. But what's the best sports town you've been to, professional, collegiate?
Other than Stillwater?
Good answer. Good answer.
Crowd pleaser.
Oh, well, Stanford's campus is awfully good to go visit there. Austin with the nightlife is pretty sweet. North Carolina and Duke are really nice places to go to. Boy, if I had a favorite, though, I might have to go back to my beloved Syracuse because that's always there's the addition of nostalgia whenever I go back there, and it always feels a little retro.
So you don't have to answer Oklahoma State. We'll let you off the hook on this one.
Okay.
But favorites to win the college football playoff next year and the Women's College World Series coming up in about a month and a half.
Well, I'd say definitely UCLA is right now just sitting on one loss, although Oklahoma is pretty hot right now. Football next year, goodness. It's always hard to pick against Clemson and Alabama. I'm very intrigued to see how Jalen Hurts does down the road. And, I don't know who's going to be the next Ohio State quarterback, probably the transfer from Georgia. So they might just be reloaded and ready to go too. Those would probably be the ones I'm going to be keeping. And my dark horse would be the Cowboys, of course.
Well, we have our hopes high. We've got our fingers crossed
Yes.
that it'll be a good season next year. But thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. We hope you have a good time in Stillwater. And this means the world to us, so we're very grateful that you spent your time with us. So thank you
guys.
so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Be right back after this.